Shakespeare, sweet swan of Avon, what a sight it were to see thee in our waters yet appear. Soul of the age, the applause, delight, the wonder of our stage. My Shakespeare, rise.
This royal throne of kings, this sceptred isle, this earth of majesty, this seat of Mars, this other Eden, demi-paradise, this fortress built by nature for herself against infection and the hand of war, this happy breed of men, this little world, this blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England.
Thus did William Shakespeare, one of the rarest pieces of good luck that ever fell to the share of a race, gentle Will, as his friends called him, whose plays live in every language, salute the country of his birth. This is Stratford, Stratford on the Avon, the town in which Shakespeare was born as it is today. By the 1500s, the Shakespeares were tenant farmers of Robert Arden, a rich squire, who lived in this house in the neighboring village of Wilmcote. Robert Arden had a daughter named Mary. Shakespeare's father's name was John, and in time, John Shakespeare and Mary Arden were married. They say here, at the little parish church of Aston Cantlow. And then, because John Shakespeare didn't want to be a tenant farmer like his father, but something more, he brought his bride to Stratford to live in this house that still stands on Henley Street. Fortune soon embraced John Shakespeare, who, setting himself up in his new home as a glover, and gradually buying property and succeeding in trade, began a rapid rise to distinction, taking his place in Stratford's Guildhall as town councillor, constable, chamberlain, alderman, reaching finally the summit of civic life, High Bailiff. But it was before this came to pass that William was born. The day was probably April 23rd, the year 1564. No one, of course, had any way of telling, as water was put to boil over the fire, that what was about to happen was the most notable event in the history of English literature. No doubt, the midwife was called in haste, perhaps greeted the pacing husband here below, and made her way upstairs. In the bedroom, Mary Shakespeare lay waiting to be delivered of children. A boy was born, and doubtless put to rest in a cradle close by. If the date was April the 23rd, as tradition holds, Then it was a fitting day, St. George's Day, the patron saint of England. 2 or 3 days later, the child was taken to Holy Trinity Church, and there carried to the baptismal font and christened William. This much we know for certain, for the records of the church so show it. Thus did William Shakespeare come into the world. It was a wonderful place to grow up, the land that lay all about Stratford. A small boy wandering aimlessly, with such sights to feast his eyes on as would nourish his soul for a lifetime. Later, much later, this, the forest of Arden, that he knew as a child, would be transposed to the stage for a setting in the play As You Like It.
A greenwood tree who loves to lie with me and turn his merry note, his merry, merry note unto the sweet bird's throat. Come hither, hither, come hither, come hither, come hither, come hither, come hither, come hither.
One day, when he was 7 years old, perhaps, and already knowledgeable in elementary reading and writing, taught him by the parish clerk, he leaves his house, no longer free to wander, but instead, with shining morning face, follows the cobbled way to school. Soon he reaches the Guildhall he knew so well, for his father, as a member of the Stratford Council, had his meeting chamber there. On the floor above was this schoolroom. Entering, he takes a seat behind the desk and looks up to behold the master, a stern, well-paid scholar from Oxford. Outside, the bright days seemed to go to waste. School continued from 7 in the morning in winter till 5 in the afternoon. Studies were composed almost entirely of Latin, learned from Lilly's grammar. Long passages from Plutarch, Terence, and Ovid were required to be learnt by heart. It was Wilson's rhetoric for English and the Bible. Discipline was strong, punishment severe. For God, they said, had sanctified the rod. So Shakespeare's school years passed. By the time he was 18, and perhaps apprenticed in his father's trade, the family had increased to include 4 others: Gilbert, Joan, Richard, and baby Edmund. Then, into his life stepped Anne Hathaway, 8 years his senior, who lived in this house at Shottery, near Stratford, with her ailing farmer father and stepmother. When William went to call on Anne, he was, in fact, calling upon a woman who, at 26, was probably considered an old maid by the community. This didn't seem to deter William, as he sat before this fireplace in the days of their courtship. And so, William and Anne were joined together, some believe here, in Temple Grafton. Shakespeare returned with his bride to the household on Henley Street, where his father's fortunes some years before had taken an abrupt turn for the worse. He stopped attending council meetings, he mortgaged his wife's holdings, and he was assailed on all sides by creditors. In this atmosphere of worry, 3 children were born to the newlyweds. First, Susanna, and a year later, twins, a boy, Hamnet, a girl, Judith. And then, as legend has it, William fell into trouble with Sir Thomas Lucy, knight, member of Parliament, one time High Sheriff of the area. He lived here, at Charlotte, which had a deer park. Here, tradition holds, Shakespeare, perhaps with some companions, came stealthily one night, poaching. It was to escape the wrath of Sir Thomas, goes the story, that William Shakespeare left Stratford. All that is certain is that there is a bridge over the Avon in Stratford today, over which, in Shakespeare's time, one had to cross to travel to London. And that Shakespeare, at some point, must have put town, home, and family behind him, and, as had many young men before and since, set out across it to seek his fortune in London. A fortune destined to stir the minds of men for centuries thereafter. This is what London looked like when William Shakespeare arrived there sometime between the years of 1585 and 1592. These are what Shakespearean scholars call the lost years, lacking documentary evidence. Most of what has been written of him covering this evasive period is pure conjecture. During these years, and by what steps we can only imagine, William Shakespeare became an actor and playwright in the London of Queen Elizabeth. Elizabeth, who, as legend has it, came to Middle Temple Hall in London, where her portrait now hangs, to see a performance of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. She sat, tradition holds, in this balcony and saw the play performed on this stage. Perhaps with Shakespeare himself, a member of the Lord Chamberlain's company, acting a role. Here she listened to the opening words of the love-sick Duke of Eluria.
If music be the food of love, play on, give me excess of it, that surfeiting the appetite may sicken and so die. That strain again. It had a dying fall. Oh, it came o'er my ear like the sweet sound that breathes upon a bank of violets, stealing and giving odor. Enough, no more. 'Tis not so sweet now as it was before. Oh, spirit of love, how quick and fresh art thou, that notwithstanding thy capacity receiveth as the sea, naught enters there, but falls into abatement and low price, even in a minute. So full of shapes is fancy that it alone is high fantastical.
Queen Elizabeth must have found Twelfth Night delightful. Perhaps she was not so certain about the play Richard II. This is the coast of Wales, where Shakespeare set Act 3, Scene 2 of this most poetic of his histories. Here Richard returns from fighting revolt in Ireland, only to find his cousin Bolingbroke, later Henry IV, leading a revolt against him.
Barclafley Castle, call they this at hand? Needs must I like it well. I weep for joy to stand upon my kingdom once again. Not all the water in the rough, rude sea can wash the balm from an anointed king. The breath of worldly men cannot depose the deputy elected by the Lord. For every man that Bolingbroke hath pressed to lift shrewd steel against our golden crown, God for his Richard hath in heavenly pay a glorious angel. Then, if angels fight, weak men must fall, for heaven still guards the right.
But heaven did not smile upon Richard. Here at Flint Castle, after the desertion of his troops, he's taken prisoner by Bolingbroke.
Down, down I come, like glistering phaeton, wanting the manage of unruly jades. In the base court, down, king, for night owls shriek where mounting larks should sing.
At Westminster Hall in London, where the play continues, Bolingbroke, who all along has pretended allegiance to the king, compels Richard to abdicate the crown.
Are you contented to resign the crown?
No. No. Why must nothing be? Therefore, no, for I resign to thee. Now, mark me, how I will undo myself. I give this heavy weight from off my head, and this unwieldy scepter from my hand, the pride of kingly sway from out my heart. With mine own tears I wash away my balm. With mine own hands I give away my crown. With mine own tongue deny my sacred state. With mine own breath release all duteous oaths. All pomp and majesty I do forswear. My manors, rents, revenues I forego. My acts, decrees, and statutes I deny. God pardon all oaths that are broke to me. God keep all vows unbroke are made to thee. Make me that nothing have, with nothing grieved, and thou with all pleased that hast all achieved. Long mayst thou live in Richard's seat to sit, and soon lie Richard in an earthy pit. God save King Henry, unking Richard says, and send him many years of sunshine days.
This is the effigy of Richard's queen, which lies over her tomb today next to his in Westminster Abbey. Bolingbroke, fearing even a deposed king as a danger, orders the queen sent to France and Richard imprisoned. Before her departure, she waits to say farewell. Outside the Tower of London.
This way the king will come. This is the way to Julius Caesar's ill-erected tower. But soft, but see, or rather do not see, my fair rose wither. Yet look up, behold, that you in pity may dissolve to dew and wash him fresh again with true love tears. Ah, thou, the model where old Troy did stand, thou map of honor, thou King Richard's tomb, and not King Richard. Thou most beauteous inn, why should hard-favored grief be lodged in thee, when triumph is become an alehouse guest?
Join not with grief, fair woman. learn, good soul, to think our former state a happy dream, from which awaked the truth of what we are shows us but this: I am sworn brother sweet to grim necessity, and he and I will keep a league till death.
This is Windsor Castle, not far from London. And this is the town surrounding it, where he set his play, The Merry Wives of Windsor, the only play drawn entirely from the life of the English merchant class from which he came. Here in Windsor, Shakespeare's most famous comic character, Sir John Falstaff, is busy wooing two married women at once. Upon a husband's unexpected arrival, they trick him into hiding in a laundry basket. And, just as they'd planned their revenge, he's taken and dumped into the water. He emerges, wet and blustering.
Go fetch me a quart of sack. Put a toast in it. Have I lived to be carried in a basket and to be thrown into the Thames like a barrow of butcher's offal? Well, if I be served such another trick, I'll have my brains taken out and buttered and give them to a dog for the New Year's gift. The rogues slighted me into the river with as little remorse as they would have drowned a blind bitch's puppies, 15 in the litter. And you may know by my size that I have a kind of alacrity in sinking. If the bottom were as deep as hell, I should drown. I've been drowned, but that the shore was shelvy and shallow, a death that I abhor, for the water swells a man, and what a thing should I have been when I had been swelled. I should have been a mountain of money.
Falstaff is presented by Shakespeare as the buffoon companion of Prince Hal throughout his plays about Henry IV, whose effigy, shown here, is in Canterbury Cathedral. For Henry, Falstaff symbolizes the life of dissipation which he believes is ruining his son. The cares of kingship weigh heavily upon the monarch, eternally challenging his peace.
How many thousand of my poorest subjects are at this hour asleep? All asleep, oh gentle sleep, nature's soft nurse. How have I frighted thee that thou no more wilt weigh mine eyelids down? Wilt thou, oh partial sleep, give thy repose to the wet sea boy in an hour so rude? And in the calmest and most stillest night, with all appliances and means to boot, deny it to a king, then happy low, lie down, uneasy lies the head that wears a crown.
But Henry is mistaken in thinking his son, Prince Hal, is unaware of the difficulties that accompany the crown. For as the king lies in his last sickness, Hal stands by his bedside and speaks of those burdens.
Why doth the crown lie there upon his pillow, being so troublesome a bedfellow? O polished perturbation, golden care, that keep'st the ports of slumber open wide to many a watchful night. Sleep with it now. O majesty, when thou dost pinch thy bearer, thou dost sit like a rich armor worn in heat of day that scalds with safety. my gracious lord, my father. Thy due from me is tears and heavy sorrows of the blood. My due from thee is this imperial crown, which, as immediate from thy place and blood, derives itself to me. Lo, where it sits, which heaven shall guard, and put the world's whole strength into one giant arm, it shall not force this lineal honor from me. This from thee will I to mine leave, as 'tis left to me.
Come hither to me, Harry. I stay too long by thee, I weary thee. Dost thou so hunger for my empty chair that thou wilt needs invest thee with mine honors before thy hour be ripe? Oh, foolish youth, thou seekst the greatness that will overwhelm thee. Thou hast stolen that which after some few hours were thine without offense, and at my death thou hast sealed up my expectation. Thou hidest 1,000 daggers in thy thoughts, which thou hast whetted on thy stony heart, to stab but half an hour of my life. What? Canst thou not forbear me half an hour?
Thus did Shakespeare show Henry IV die, and his son, Prince Harold, succeed him. Here at Stratford, while Shakespeare was rising to the pinnacle of success, he suffered a most tragic blow. His only son, Hamlet, the sole heir to the family name, died at the age of 11. Shakespeare's son would never inherit properties which Shakespeare's fame and fortune now permitted him to purchase. New Place, the finest house in town, which stood on this site. Stratford, though he might visit it time and again during his travels as an actor, would perhaps never again be as dear to him. Meanwhile, his company, the Lord Chamberlain's men, had built on the south bank of the Thames a new theatre in the shape of an O, called the Globe. For this new theatre, Shakespeare wrote a new play, turning the Prince Hal of the Henry IV dramas into the great English warrior king, Henry V. In the prologue to the play, he apologizes to the audience for the limits of his stage.
Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very casques that did affright the air at Agincourt? On your imaginary forces work. Suppose within the girdle of these walls are now confined 2 mighty monarchies. Piece out our imperfections with your thoughts. Think, when we talk of horses, that you see them, printing their proud hoofs in the receiving earth. For 'tis your thoughts that now must deck our kings, carry them here and there, jumping o'er times, turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass. For the which supply, admit me, chorus, to this history, who prologue like your humble patience pray, gently to hear, kindly to judge our play. Suppose that you have seen the well-appointed king at Hampton Pier embark his royalty, and his brave fleet with silken streamers the young Phoebus fanning. Play with your fancies, and in them behold, upon the hempen tackle, ship boys climbing. Behold the threadened sails, borne with the invisible and creeping wind, draw the huge bottoms through the furrowed sea, breasting the lofty surge, holding due course to Harfleur. Follow, follow, grapple your minds to sternage of this navy, and leave your England. Work your thoughts, and therein see a siege. Behold the ordnance on their carriages, with fatal mouths gaping on girded harfleur. Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more! For close the wall up with our English dead. In peace there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger, stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood, disguise fair nature with hard-favored rage. Then lend the eye a terrible aspect. Let it pry through the portage of the head like the brass cannon. Let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully as doth a galled rock, or hang and jutty his confounded base, swilled with a wild and wasteful ocean. Now set the teeth and stretch the nostril wide. Hold hard the breath and bend up every spirit to his full height. On, you noblest English. I see you stand like greyhounds in the slips, straining upon the start. The game's afoot. Follow your spirit, and upon this charge cry, God for Harry, England, and St. George!
On March the 4th, 1603, after 45 years of glorious rule, Queen Elizabeth died amid a sun rang out, not a bugle sounded. Her successor became James I of England. Due to the terror of the plague, James did not come to London for a year. After the entertainments arranged to greet the king, Shakespeare wrote for his company, now known as the King's Men, one of his greatest tragedies, Macbeth. Shakespeare draws upon the chronicles of Holinshed to tell what happens as Macbeth returns from battle with a fellow chieftain, Banquo, an ancestor of James I. On a Scottish heath, here, tradition says, they come upon 3 witches.
Where'st thou been, sister?
Killing swine.
Still with her. A sailor's wife had chestnuts in her lap and munched and munched and munched. Give me, quoth I, I'll roint thee, witch, the rump-fed runyon cries. Like a rat without a tail, I'll do, and I'll do. Be the charms wound up.
What are these, so withered and so wild in their attire, that look not like the inhabitants of the earth, and yet are on't?
Speak, if you can. What are you?
All hail, Macbeth! Hail to thee, Thane of Glam!
All hail, Macbeth! Hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor!
All hail, Macbeth, that shalt be king hereafter.
If you can look into the seeds of time, and see which grain will grow and which will not, speak then to me, who neither beg nor fear your favors nor your hate.
Banquo and Macbeth, all hail.
Stay, you imperfect speakers, tell me more. By Sinel's death I know I am Thane of Glamis, but how of Cawdor? The Thane of Cawdor lives, a prosperous gentleman, and to be king stands not within the prospect of belief, no more than to be Cawdor. Say from whence you owe this strange intelligence, or why upon this blasted heath you stop our way with such prophetic greeting. Speak, I charge you.
The earth hath bubbles, as the water has, and these are of
Macbeth soon learns that the king, in reward for his valor, has indeed made him Thane of Cawdor. Cawdor Castle still stands in Scotland. But what of the witch's prophecy that he would be king? When Duncan, the reigning king, and his sons come to pay Macbeth a promised visit, his secret thoughts of securing the throne are reinforced by his ruthless wife. He enters Duncan's chamber and murders him.
I have done the deed. Methought I heard a voice cry, "Sleep no more. Macbeth does murder sleep. Glamis hath murdered sleep, and therefore Cawdor shall sleep no more. Macbeth shall sleep no more."
Today, in company with scores of other Scottish kings, in dusty death, the king and his murderer, their graves unmarked, lie buried here on the island of Iona, off the shores of Scotland. Duncan sleeping his interrupted sleep, and Macbeth perhaps the only sleep he has known since the deed. Shakespeare knew this church as St. Mary Overy. It is now Suffolk Cathedral. It contains not only a monument to William Shakespeare, who is said to have attended the church, but the tomb of Shakespeare's actor brother Edmund, about whom little is known. Today, the windows of Suffolk Cathedral picture the whole course of a man's life as its most famous parishioner described it in As You Like It.
All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and seeking the bubble reputation. And then the justice, in fair round belly with good capon lined. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, and his big manly voice turning again towards childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.
Across the Thames from the cathedral was the tower that dominated the city, like the globe, also famous for its tragedies, the Tower of London. Here Shakespeare set many scenes in his plays, as when the hunchback Duke of Gloucester, murdering his way to the crown, comes to kill the imprisoned King Henry VI.
But wherefore dost thou come? Is't for my life? Thinkst thou I am an executioner? If murdering innocents be executing, why then thou art an executioner. Thy son I killed for his presumption. Thus I prophesy that many a thousand which now mistrust no parcel of my fear shall rue the hour that ever thou wast born. The owl shrieked at thy birth, an evil sign. The night crow cried, a boding luckless time. Dogs howled, and hideous tempest shook down trees. Teeth hadst thou in thy head when thou wast born, to signify thou camest to bite the world. And if the rest be true which I have heard, thou camest...
I'll hear no more! Thy prophet in thy speech! For this, amongst the rest, was I ordained.
Aye, and for much more slaughter after this. Oh, God, forgive my sins and pardon thee.
Down! Down to hell and say I sent thee thither. I, that have neither pity, love, nor fear.
Gloucester seizes the throne as Richard III, and after the Battle of Bosworth, Richard dies at the hands of the Earl of Richmond, who takes the crown and then seeks to bind up the nation's wounds. Shakespeare concludes his history of civil strife over the crown, the Wars of the Roses. The red rose, badge of the House of Lancaster, and the white, that of the House of York.
Inter their bodies as becomes their births. And then, as we have ta'en the sacrament, we will unite the white rose and the red. Smile heaven upon this fair conjunction that long have frowned upon their enmity. Oh, now let Richmond and Elizabeth, the true succeeders of each royal house, by God's fair ordinance conjoin together, and let their heirs, God, if thy will be so, enrich the time to come with smooth-faced peace, with smiling plenty, and fair, prosperous days.
It was at Hampton Court that Shakespeare set a scene in the last of his 10 historical dramas, the story of Richmond's son, Henry VIII. It was built by Cardinal Wolsey and later presented by him in an unsuccessful attempt to curry the king's favor and forestall his fall. Here Shakespeare placed the cardinal to reflect upon his final overthrow.
Farewell, a long farewell to all my greatness. This is the state of man. Today he puts forth the tender leaves of hopes. Tomorrow blossoms, and bears his blushing honors thick upon him. The third day comes a frost, a killing frost, and when he thinks, good easy man, full surely his greatness is a ripening, nips his root, and then he falls, as I do. Vain pomp and glory of this world, I hate ye. I feel my heart new opened. Oh, how wretched is that poor man that hangs on princes' favors. There is betwixt that smile we would aspire to, that sweet aspect of princes and their ruin, more pangs and fears than wars or women have. And when he falls like Lucifer, never to hope again. Had I but served my God with half the zeal I served my king, he would not in mine age have left me naked to mine enemies.
Some time before his 50th year, William Shakespeare, retiring completely from active work in the theatre, turned his back on London and set out once more along the road to Stratford. It was to be his last trip home. Soon he reached Clopton Bridge. He now crossed again the bridge he had once crossed, an unknown country boy traveling hopefully to London. only this time he was returning to Stratford as its leading citizen, wealthy and famous, and a gentleman by virtue of a grant of arms from the College of Heralds. He re-entered New Place, there to spend the last years of his life in the comfort of his family. Afterwards, Shakespeare prepared his will.
In the name of God, Amen. I, William Shakespeare, of Stratford-upon-Avon, in the county of Warwickshire, gentleman, in perfect health and memory, God be praised, do make and ordain this my last will and testament in manner and form following. That is to say, first, I commend my soul into the hands of God, my Creator, hoping and assuredly believing through the only merits of Jesus Christ, my Saviour, to be made partaker of life everlasting, and my body to the earth whereof it is made.
And then, a month later, on the 23rd of April, in the year 1616, the same day on which tradition holds that he was born, at the age of 52 years, time came round, and where he did begin, there he ended. Today, in Stratford, there is more than Shakespeare's birthplace and tomb. There stands a living monument to Shakespeare, the Royal Shakespeare Theatre. Each year, thousands come to it to face the leading actors of the day, standing in the spotlight on its stage, and hear, echoing over the centuries, Shakespeare's magic words.
Ye elves of hills, brooks, standing lakes and groves, you demi-puppets that by moonshine do the green sour ringlets make, and you whose pastime is to make midnight mushrooms that rejoice to hear the solemn curfew, by whose aid, weak masters though ye be, I have bedimmed the noontide sun, called forth the mutinous winds, and twixt the green sea and the azured vault set roaring war. To the dread rattling thunder have I given fire, and rifted Jove's stout oak with his own bolt. The strong-based promontory have I made shake. Graves at my command have waked their sleepers, hoped, and let them forth by my so potent art. But this rough magic I here abjure, and when I have required some heavenly music, which even now I do, to work mine end upon their senses that this airy charm is for, I'll break my staff, bury it certain fathoms in the earth, and deeper than did ever plummet sound, I'll drown my book.
Shakespeare's book will never drown, for, as Ben Jonson put it,
Shakespeare, thou art a monument without a tomb, and art alive still while thy book doth live, and we have wits to read and praise to give.
he was not of an age, but for all time.
Thank you.
Amen.